Everyone heard the knock. Everyone, but no one else had the guts to answer. Because when Karen came pounding on your door, it wasn't just a knock, it was a threat, a warning, a storm announcing itself. And when I opened mine that afternoon, I didn't realize I had just stepped into a war. My neighborhood looks like perfection from the outside. Symmetry everywhere. Rows of beige houses, lawns clipped down to the millimeter, mailboxes painted the same dull shades. From a distance, it looks safe, peaceful, but there's a monster hidden in plain sight, the HOA. I wasn't a member. I never wanted to be. Because freedom, to me, meant not asking permission for the color of my fence. It meant not bowing down to a board of strangers deciding how I lived in my own home. I thought I was safe. My pool sat behind a tall fence, private and quiet, not enormous, not flashy, just mine. Every penny earned, every inspection passed, every law followed. I built it with pride. I swam in it with peace. I guarded it with certainty. But that day, peace died at my front door. Karen stood there with two stone-faced board members. Her eyes gleamed with a fire that only arrogance can fuel. "The HOA board," she said, her voice trembling with self-importance, "has voted on a new meeting location, your pool." I stared at her, my lips curled into a laugh. But no one else laughed, not the strangers at her side, not even Karen. And in the silence that followed, something inside me shifted. She was dead serious. My voice came out calm, controlled, final. "No." It was just one word, but her face cracked open like glass. "Actually," she hissed, "the HOA bylaws allow us to use any neighborhood amenities for official business. The park is too open, too messy. Your pool is perfect. Ambience, privacy, convenience." Ambience, she said it like my home was a hotel lobby, like I wasn't even standing there. I leaned closer, met her eyes, and let my words land sharp. "That pool is mine, my fence, my yard, my rules. You're not stepping 1 foot back there." The silence between us burned. Her smile twitched. The two board members muttered, "Selfish homeowner," like some curse. But the real curse wasn't what they said. It was the look Karen gave me, the cold, tight smile of someone who had just made me her obsession. They stormed off, their voices dripping with contempt. And as I stood in the doorway, one truth carved itself into my bones. This wasn't about a pool. This was about control. Karen didn't hate me because I said no. She hated me because I reminded her of something she couldn't own, something she couldn't bend. And people like Karen, they don't stop, they escalate. I tried to shake it, tried to believe the storm had passed. But when the weekend came, the sound of tires crunching gravel outside dragged me to the window. What I saw nearly knocked the breath out of me. Karen wasn't alone this time. She brought the HOA president. And behind them, 2 armed police officers walking up my path. My heart slammed in my chest, my fists tightened at my sides, because in that instant I knew the truth. This wasn't just a fight over property. This was war. And the battlefield was my backyard. The doorbell exploded through the house like a siren, not a neighborly ring, not a polite knock. This was a command, a warning shot. I opened it and there she was, Karen, standing proud, her hands folded like she was royalty. The HOA president loomed just behind her and flanking them, 2 uniformed police officers. Their presence wasn't casual, their belts heavy, their eyes sharp. Karen's smirk widened. "Officer," she said sweetly, pointing behind me, "this homeowner has locked off access to community property. Our pool, he's refusing entry." "Our pool." The words hit like a slap. My backyard, my fence, my sweat and money poured into that ground, and she dared to call it theirs. The officers stepped forward, calm, professional. "Sir, can you explain what's going on?" I breathed slow. Fear wanted to take over, but rage beat louder. I motioned toward the backyard. "That pool is mine, on my deed, behind my fence, private property. I can show you records, surveys, whatever proof you want. But this," I cut a glare at Karen, "is trespassing dressed up as entitlement." The officers exchanged a look. They didn't need the paperwork. The pool was right there, clear as daylight, behind my fence, attached to my home. Karen's smile cracked. She stammered, trying to twist her words into authority. The bylaws clearly state. One officer cut her off, his voice sharp. Ma'am, bylaws don't override private property law. This is his pool, his land. You have no jurisdiction here. Her face turned red, then purple, then pale. She sputtered like a candle in the wind. The officers turned back to me, calmer now. We just need to confirm your ID matches this address. Then we'll be done. I handed it over, my hand steady, my voice steady, because in that moment I had won. They handed it back, tipped their heads, and stepped away. Sorry for the disturbance, sir. But Karen, she wasn't sorry, not even close. Her lips curled into that venomous smile, the one she wore like armor. And before she turned to leave, she leaned closer, her whisper low, sharp enough to cut skin. This isn't over. And I believed her. I watched them walk away, the HOA president trailing behind, the officers climbing into their cruiser. The sun dipped lower. Shadows stretched across my lawn, and I stood frozen, my chest burning with anger and something worse, dread. Because Karen had just been told no by the law itself. And people like her, when rules stop working, they make new ones. Days passed, the quiet should have been comforting, but silence in a war is never peace. It's the calm before artillery fire. Then the letter arrived. A thin white envelope, stamped with the HOA logo like a brand. My name in cold black ink. I tore it open. My eyes scanned the words. Violation, failure to cooperate, fines. They were accusing me of interfering with HOA activities. As if denying them my pool was some crime. As if saying no was a protest worthy of punishment. I gripped the paper until it nearly ripped. My blood roared in my ears. But beneath the anger, clarity rose. This wasn't about the fine. It wasn't about the pool anymore. This was Karen, her obsession. Her need to break me, bend me, prove she could control me where she couldn't before. And that was the moment I decided. I wasn't going to sit quietly and let her win. I opened my laptop. Fingers slammed the keys. Lawyer, HOA disputes, call now. The first number I found, I dialed. The man on the other end listened carefully, patiently, and when I explained, his voice carried the weight of something Karen never expected, the truth. You're not a member of the HOA. They have zero authority over your property. They can't fine you. They can't use your pool. They can't touch you. Relief crashed into me, but so did fire, because now I knew every letter she sent, every threat she scribbled, every false fine she dreamed up. It was all smoke. Lies, empty intimidation. And I decided right then, I wasn't going to burn the letters. I wasn't going to throw them away. I was going to keep them, every single one. Evidence, proof, ammunition. Karen thought she was clever, but all she was doing was loading the gun I'd eventually fire back at her. And while she glared at me from across the street, while her eyes burned holes in my back every time I stepped outside, while neighbors whispered about her obsession growing darker by the day, I smiled. Because war wasn't coming. War had already begun. And this time, I wasn't backing down. They say silence is golden, but in my neighborhood, silence was dangerous. Karen wasn't quiet because she gave up. She was quiet because she was plotting. The letters started rolling in, first one, then another. Petty fines printed in bold ink, trash bins too visible, lawn not uniform, blinds not consistent with neighborhood standards. Absurd. Every envelope reeked of her perfume of control. Every word screamed her obsession. And every time I pulled one from my mailbox, I didn't rip it up. I didn't throw it out. I stacked them neat and perfect in a folder because this wasn't harassment anymore. This was evidence. But Karen didn't stop with paper. The stares began. I'd step outside just to breathe, and there she'd be standing at the end of her driveway. Not waving, not smiling, just watching. Eyes locked on me like a predator sizing up prey. I'd mow my lawn and I'd feel it, her gaze burning my skin. I'd take the trash out and her blinds would twitch, just enough to remind me she was there. It should have scared me. Maybe it did deep down, but something else grew louder than fear. Anger. Because when someone tries to strip you of your dignity, your freedom, your peace, you either surrender or you fight. And me, I don't surrender. So I started thinking, not of eggs thrown at her house, not of tires slashed in the night. That wasn't my level, that was teenager stuff. This was war. I needed something bigger, smarter, something that wouldn't just sting. It had to humiliate her, strip her power in broad daylight. That's when the idea hit me. The pool, the very thing she tried to steal, would become the weapon that destroyed her. I started planning, lists, invitations, calls. Every neighbor within 3 blocks, everyone except Karen. The ones who rolled their eyes when she lectured them about sidewalk cracks. The ones she fined for having too many cars parked out front. The ones she called out for grass an inch too tall. They came. And when I say they came, I mean more than I ever expected. My backyard filled with laughter splashes, music echoing through the air. Coolers stacked with ice, plates heavy with food, phones out, photos flashing. But this wasn't just a party, this was a statement. And the statement was loud: this pool is mine, and Karen isn't invited. I didn't need to call her, I didn't need to tell her, because people like Karen, they always sniff out the one door they're not allowed through. And right on cue, I saw her. Marching down the sidewalk, chin high, face flushed with outrage. She stormed to my gate, her voice cutting above the music. "Let me in, I'm on the board. This is an HOA violation." I didn't flinch, I didn't blink. I walked to the gate, looked her dead in the eye, and let my words slice her open in front of everyone. "This is a private party, no invite, no entry." The crowd fell silent for a heartbeat. Then laughter. Not cruel, not mocking. Just honest laughter from neighbors who'd finally seen the queen stripped of her crown. Karen's face collapsed, red with rage, pale with humiliation, twisted with the realization that she wasn't feared anymore. She was the joke. She tried to argue, she tried to push, but the moment had already swallowed her whole. The whispers spread, the cameras caught it. The photos flew onto Facebook pages, neighborhood forums, HOA group chats. And for the first time, the power shifted. Not because I screamed louder, not because I broke any rules, but because I reminded everyone of the truth. Karen wasn't in control. She never was. That night, as the party carried on, I stood by my pool. Music pumping, neighbors smiling, the air electric with freedom. And I realized something. Karen had tried to use my pool to make herself more powerful. But in the end, it was the very thing that destroyed her. And yet, even as I watched her storm away down the street, shoulders shaking with fury, I knew this wasn't the end. Because someone like Karen, someone drunk on control, they don't quit. No, they wait. And they come back swinging. Everyone thought the pool party was the finale, the moment the curtain dropped, but anyone who truly knew Karen knew better. Because humiliation doesn't kill people like her, it fuels them. The next morning, the letters doubled, thick envelopes slapped into my mailbox like bullets. Failure to comply, violation of community standards, obstruction of board activities. Each word typed with venom, each fine laughably empty, yet each one proof that she hadn't moved on. And everywhere I went, her eyes followed. Not from her driveway now, not from her window. She came closer. Louder, she'd stop me mid-step in the street. "Trash bins too visible, you'll hear about this." She'd sneer at my lawn. "Non-compliant length, expect a fine." Neighbors watched, whispered, some laughed, some shook their heads, but no one intervened, not yet. Because bullies like Karen don't collapse overnight. They self-destruct slowly until everyone gets front-row seats. It was during the next HOA meeting that it happened. I wasn't there, but word spreads fast in places like this. Karen walked in, her binder clutched like scripture. Her mouth already spitting fire about me, my pool, my party. She ranted, waving letters, claiming I was sabotaging the neighborhood, setting a dangerous example. The president listened, stony-faced, silent. Then, in front of the entire board, she asked one question Karen didn't expect. Did the police not already confirm it was his private property? The room froze. Karen sputtered. fumbled, tried to twist words into power, but the silence was heavy. The board members weren't blind, they weren't deaf. They'd seen the photos, heard the whispers, read the posts that lit up every neighborhood forum. Karen's obsession wasn't a secret anymore. It was a stain. And that night, the whispers grew into thunder. Neighbors who once feared her now mocked her. Parents she once lectured now laughed when she passed. Even the people she once thought were allies avoided her, because nobody wants to be dragged down with the ship when it's sinking. And Karen's ship, it wasn't just sinking, it was on fire. I found out days later. The president herself showed up at my door. Not with police, not with threats, just a tired smile and tired eyes. "Look," she said, "I wanted you to know Karen's been removed from the board, effective immediately." The vote was unanimous. Her words lingered in the air like music. Removed. For Karen, it wasn't just a punishment. It was exile. To lose the one weapon she had left, the one title she wore like armor, HOA board member. Without it, she was just another neighbor, just another face on the block, just another person with no power. And that, for Karen, was the worst punishment of all. I should have felt triumphant. I should have celebrated. But when I looked into the president's eyes, I saw something else. Exhaustion, frustration, embarrassment. Because Karen hadn't just been a nightmare for me. She'd been a nightmare for everyone. Honestly, the president sighed, she made us all look bad. The police call, the letters, the pool incident, we're still cleaning up the mess. It's going to take time to rebuild trust with this community. For the first time I saw it. The board wasn't a monolith. They weren't all Karens. Some were just neighbors trying and failing to keep peace. And suddenly this wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about fines or parties or pool gates. It was about something bigger. Because Karen hadn't just tried to take my pool, she poisoned the whole block. And maybe, just maybe, tearing her down wasn't enough. Maybe the neighborhood needed to remember what freedom looked like. But that night, as I sat by the water, the pool lit by soft lights, the air calm for the first time in weeks, I let myself feel it. Relief. For the first time since she knocked on my door, the weight lifted. The tension cracked. Karen had fallen. But even then, in the quiet hum of crickets, in the cool shimmer of my pool, one thought cut through the peace like a blade. People like her don't disappear. They stew, they simmer. And when the moment's right, they come back. Everyone thought Karen would fight her way back. That she'd claw and scream and find some loophole to drag herself onto the board again. But when the vote was announced, when the title was ripped from her hands, something shifted. For the first time since I'd known her, she didn't look powerful. She looked hollow. Neighbors saw it, they talked, and soon the whispers weren't whispers anymore. They kicked her off. Finally, she brought it on herself. The same people who once jumped when she spoke now laughed behind her back. At the grocery store, on sidewalks, in line at the coffee shop, she was Karen the board member anymore. She was just Karen. And in our neighborhood, just Karen meant something else entirely. It meant the problem. I watched it happen in real time. Invitations stopped coming. People crossed the street to avoid her. Friends she once counted on vanished overnight. Even the ones who used to tolerate her petty crusades now stayed silent when she waved. The isolation wrapped around her like chains. But chains don't always make people quiet. Sometimes they make them dangerous. One evening I caught her standing at the edge of my property again. Not with letters, not with fines, just standing, staring. Her face was pale. Her hands trembled at her sides. She didn't speak. She didn't move. Just those eyes burning with hatred, hollow with loss. It should have scared me. Maybe it did. But more than fear, I felt something sharper, pity. Because when people lose power, they either rebuild or they rot. Karen was rotting. But the thing about rot, everyone can smell it. The pool party humiliation was still fresh in everyone's memory. The police call, the fines, the drama. And with each retelling, each photo shared online, her reputation sank lower. The story wasn't whispered anymore. It was shouted, exaggerated, spread like wildfire. She called the cops over a pool. She tried to steal it. She thought she owned it. The truth twisted into legend, and the legend destroyed her faster than anything else could. I didn't even need to defend myself anymore. The neighborhood defended me for me. One neighbor, a quiet, older man who'd barely spoken to me in years, stopped me on the sidewalk. His voice was low, steady. "You did the right thing. Someone had to stand up to her." It hit me harder than I expected, because for weeks I thought I was fighting alone. But I was. Everyone had been watching, waiting, hoping someone would push back. And now that I had, they weren't afraid anymore. Karen was. Because power isn't just in titles or fines. Power is in numbers, and she didn't have any left. Still, she tried. A week later, another letter arrived. This one different, not from the HOA, from Karen herself. Handwritten, messy, rage dripping from every word. "You may have fooled them, but you didn't fool me. This isn't finished." I stared at the paper, her handwriting jagged like broken glass, and instead of anger, I laughed. Because she didn't realize something yet. This wasn't my fight anymore. It was hers. Her fight against herself, her obsession, her downfall. And while she wasted her nights scribbling threats, I spent mine by the pool. Neighbors came by. Kids splashed in the water. Music filled the air, and the more life grew around me, the more isolated she became. It wasn't revenge anymore. It was karma, slow, heavy, inevitable. And it was beautiful to watch. But as the summer night stretched on, as the water shimmered under the lights and laughter rolled over fences, a thought still gnawed at me. Karen wasn't gone, not really. She'd lost her title, lost her power, lost her allies. But obsession like hers doesn't just fade. It waits. It festers. It sharpens its claws in the dark. And I couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere, somehow, she was planning her next move. Everyone thought it was over. The board had voted her out. The neighbors had turned their backs. Her power was gone, her throne destroyed. But if Karen knew how to do one thing, it was this: refuse to stay buried. The first signs were small. Strange cars parked near my house late at night. Flyers taped to mailboxes warning of unsafe homeowners, unsigned, but everyone knew whose handwriting it was. Anonymous posts on neighborhood forums accusing me of endangering children with unregulated pool chemicals. She was clawing at the edges, desperate to rewrite the story. Desperate to make me the villain so she could rise again as the hero. And for a moment I worried, because lies, no matter how ridiculous, spread fast. But then something happened that Karen never expected. The neighbors pushed back. When her flyers went up, they came down within hours. When her online posts appeared, they were flooded with comments mocking her, reminding her of the police call, the party, the humiliation she'd already earned. For the first time in her life, Karen's voice didn't echo, it was drowned. And that's when she snapped. It was a Friday night. The air was heavy, thick with heat. I was in the backyard, string lights glowing over the pool, a few friends sitting around, laughter rising above the crickets. For once, I felt normal again. Then the gate rattled, hard. Every head turned. And there she was. Karen, her hair wild, her face flushed, her eyes burning like coals. She gripped the gate with both hands, shaking it until it slammed against the latch. "You don't own this," she screamed, voice cracking. "This pool belongs to the neighborhood." The party went silent. My friends froze, her words sliced through the night like a blade. I stepped forward, slow, deliberate. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "I do, and you're not welcome here." Her body trembled. She pointed at me, finger quivering with rage. "I'll call the cops again. I'll have you arrested, you'll see." The neighbors, my neighbors, began to gather at their fences, drawn by the noise. Eyes watching, phones recording. And in that moment, Karen didn't just look angry. She looked unhinged. Because power wasn't just gone, dignity was gone. And when dignity leaves, madness follows. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I just turned my back to her and walked away, leaving her to shout into the night with no one listening. The gate rattled one more time, then silence. She was gone. But the damage was done not to me, to her. Because those phones that had recorded, those neighbors who had watched, the story spread faster than anything before. This wasn't the Karen who once strutted through the neighborhood, clipboard in hand. This wasn't the Karen who thought she was untouchable. This was a desperate woman, screaming at fences, clawing at gates, unraveling in front of everyone. And once the unraveling begins, it doesn't stop. The following week, the HOA president sent out an email. Neutral words, careful language, but the meaning was clear. The HOA board has received numerous complaints about recent behavior from a former board member. We want to assure all residents that this behavior does not reflect the values of our community. Steps are being taken to prevent further disruption. The steps. It was vague, but it was enough. Because everyone knew who it meant. Karen wasn't just powerless now, she was branded a liability. And in neighborhoods like ours, reputation is everything. She had lost hers completely. I should have felt victorious, and in some ways I did. But watching her unravel, watching her scream at a world that had stopped listening, I felt something else. Pity. Because once upon a time, she could have chosen peace. She could have chosen kindness. She could have lived her life without turning it into a battlefield. But she didn't. She chose war. And war always has casualties. Now, she was the only one left standing in the rubble. And yet, even as I sat by the pool that night, the water calm, the laughter returning, one thought kept gnawing at me. People like Karen don't always go quietly. Sometimes, when they have nothing left to lose, that's when they're the most dangerous. Everyone said she'd stop after that night, after the screaming at my gate, after the phones caught it all, after the whispers turned into open mockery. But Karen didn't stop. She unraveled. Day by day, she became the ghost of the block, not haunting with silence, haunting with chaos. She'd march down sidewalks, clipboard clutched in her hands even though it meant nothing now, scribbling nonsense no one cared about. She'd corner neighbors, shouting about bylaws, about safety, about standards only she believed in. And the worst part, nobody argued back anymore. They didn't need to. She wasn't feared, she wasn't respected, she wasn't even hated. She was pitied. And pity to Karen was poison. I saw it in her eyes the next time they locked on mine across the street. There was no triumph there, no smugness, just raw, burning desperation. The look of someone who had lost everything but still refused to admit it. She shouted once more, called me selfish, called me dangerous, threatened lawsuits she could never afford, punishments she could never enforce. And when no one answered, when no one clapped, when no one even flinched, her voice cracked. It wasn't anger anymore, it was something else. Loneliness. But obsession doesn't die with loneliness, it mutates. That week another letter appeared in my mailbox, not typed this time, handwritten again. The ink was jagged, the sentences broken, but the message was clear. You may think you've won, but this neighborhood will always be mine. I didn't laugh this time, I didn't rage either. I folded it carefully, slid it into the same folder where I'd kept every other letter, every other fine, every scrap of evidence she'd gifted me over the months. Because I knew this wasn't a threat anymore. It was a confession. And confessions have weight. Word spread faster than ever. Parents refused to let their kids near her house. Neighbors stopped acknowledging her altogether. She wasn't invited. She wasn't consulted. She wasn't even seen anymore unless she forced herself into the spotlight, and every time she did, she embarrassed herself further. The HOA president finally said it out loud during a community meeting. We cannot allow one person's obsession to drag us down any further. Karen is no longer part of this board. She does not represent us. She never will again. Final public inescapable. The words shattered her. She stormed out of the meeting, face pale, fists clenched, muttering curses under her breath as the entire neighborhood watched her collapse. And in that moment I felt it, the shift. Karen wasn't a threat anymore, she was a warning. A warning of what happens when control becomes your only purpose. A warning of how quickly power slips away when you abuse it. A warning to anyone who thought the HOA was untouchable, that no title can protect you from karma. That night I sat by my pool again, the same pool that started it all. The water glowed under the lights, calm, steady. Neighbors drifted in, laughter returning, life moving on. But Karen's house stayed dark. No blinds twitching, no figure at the window, no voice shouting through the night. Just silence. And for the first time since she knocked on my door, I believed something I never thought I would. Maybe finally it was over. But deep down I knew better. Because with Karen, silence wasn't peace. It was the sound of a storm gathering one last time. Everyone swore it was over. The board had cut her off. The neighbors had turned their backs. Her house was dark, her voice gone, her clipboard useless. But with Karen, endings never come quietly. It was a Saturday morning when it happened. Sun high, kids riding bikes, sprinklers ticking across lawns, normal, peaceful, until the shouting started. I stepped onto my porch and saw her. Karen, standing in the middle of the street, hair tangled, papers clutched in her fists. She was screaming at anyone who passed, waving the pages like a mad preacher with a broken gospel. Bylaws, violations, you're all breaking the rules. But no one listened. Parents pulled their kids away, neighbors turned their backs. A jogger crossed to the other side of the road. Her voice cracked, her arms shook. She hurled the papers into the air, the wind catching them, scattering them across driveways like confetti of desperation. And then, the moment that sealed it. The HOA president walked out of her house. Calm, composed, she didn't yell, she didn't argue. She just stood there in front of everyone and spoke the words Karen could never erase. This is not leadership, this is harassment, and it stops now. Silence fell, not the silence of fear, the silence of truth. Karen's mouth opened, but no words came. Her hands dropped. Her eyes darted from face to face, searching for one ally, one nod, one sign of loyalty. There was none. Not a single person stood with her. And in that silence, she realized it. She was alone, completely. Her face crumpled. Her voice broke into a sob. She stumbled back toward her house, doors slamming shut all around her, blinds lowering like guillotines. The queen of the block had been dethroned. Not by me, not by one fight. By everyone. And just like that, the storm was over. Days turned into weeks. The flyers stopped, the letters stopped, the shouting stopped. Karen was gone, not moved away, but vanished inside her own walls, isolated, forgotten. The woman who once thought she owned the neighborhood now couldn't even walk it without shame. I sat by my pool that evening, the water calm, the air finally quiet. Neighbors drifted in again, not out of curiosity, not out of defiance, but out of genuine connection. And I realized something. Karen tried to divide us. She tried to control us. She tried to turn neighbors into subjects. But in the end, she did the opposite. She brought us together. Because sometimes, it takes a tyrant to remind people what freedom feels like. As the laughter rose around me, as the water sparkled under the lights, I leaned back and let the truth settle in. Karen didn't lose because of me. She didn't lose because of the HOA president. She lost because of herself. Because when you make everything about power, you forget the one thing that actually matters: people. And when people turn against you, power means nothing. So yes, she called the cops on me. She tried to steal my pool. She sent letters, fines, threats, screams. She made me her enemy. But in the end, she destroyed herself. And maybe that's the purest form of justice. Because sometimes, karma doesn't come like thunder. Sometimes it comes like silence. You've heard this confession, now wait until you hear the next one. The truth that shatters everything you thought you knew.